It all started on a gray Thursday morning in downtown Portland. The kind of morning where the drizzle sticks to your hair and everything smells faintly of wet asphalt and roasted coffee beans. I was sitting in my usual corner at Blue Harbor Café, the one with the cracked window that let in just enough cold air to make your scarf feel necessary, scribbling in my journal. My thoughts were messy that day, tangled like the rain-soaked streets outside. That's when I noticed the first note. It was small, folded neatly, like someone had taken time to care about it. I almost didn't notice it at first, but it was perched on my table, right beside my half-empty latte. I opened it. You don't have to be strong all the time. Let yourself feel, even if the world thinks you're fragile. I froze. That line, it hit me like it had been pulled straight from my brain. My hands shook a little as I read it again. Who would know? Nobody I knew could have written something like that. Not my friends, not my family. My life was messy and hidden, and suddenly, someone outside of it seemed to see it all. For the next week, more notes appeared. Each one was specific, hauntingly precise. You smile to hide the cracks no one else can see. The rain reminds you of home, even when you're miles away. I started scanning the cafe, wondering if anyone was watching me. That's when I saw him. Always there. Always quiet. Sitting in the very last corner, laptop closed, eyes occasionally glancing up from a book, but mostly just observing. He had dark hair that fell just over his forehead, a light scruff lining his jaw, and eyes that somehow felt both distant and piercing. He looked like he belonged in a painting, like he wasn't just part of the cafe, but part of some private universe no one else could see. I wanted to ask him about the notes, but every time I thought about it, a knot formed in my stomach. There was something about him. He was silent, almost invisible, yet I could feel him, watching me. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I arrived at the cafe, drenched from the rain, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the note on my chair before I even set down my bag. You think people can't understand your pain, but you're wrong. They can. They just need time to notice. I looked around. Nobody else seemed to notice, just him, in his corner. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and then he went back to whatever he was doing. My heart was racing. That night, I lay in bed replaying every interaction I'd had with him. I'd never spoken to him, never even knew his name. And yet, somehow, he knew the invisible scars I carried. My mother's sickness, my father's silence, my own self-doubt that clawed at me every morning. The notes became my lifeline. I carried them everywhere, hiding them in my journal, reading them in the dark when sleep wouldn't come. They were terrifying and comforting all at once. Whoever he was, he saw me. One evening, the cafe was quiet. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the warm smell of coffee mingled with the faint scent of wet leaves from outside. I stayed late, trying to finish an essay, and for the first time, he walked over. My chest tightened. You've been getting the notes," he said, voice soft, almost hesitant. "I didn't want to scare you." I nodded, too stunned to speak. I know what it's like to feel invisible," he continued, "to feel like no one understands, so I tried to help." I swallowed hard. "You know, everything about me." He nodded, his eyes flicking to the floor. "Not everything, just enough to know you're not alone." We didn't speak much that night, just shared a silence that felt heavier than any conversation. But it was warm, safe. I realized then that I'd been holding my breath for months without knowing it, and somehow he'd found a way to breathe with me. The next morning, a new note awaited me at the cafe. "Meet me tomorrow. I'll be at my corner, 6 p.m. Don't be afraid." Fear and curiosity tangled in my chest. The thought of finally confronting him, of looking into the eyes of the person who seemed to understand me more than anyone else ever had, terrified me. When the next evening came, I arrived early, nerves gnawing at my stomach. He was already there, as if he'd been waiting just for me. He looked up when I entered, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You came," he said simply. Yeah," I whispered, sliding into the seat across from him. The cafe felt alive around us, but we were in our own bubble. "I'm Ethan," he said finally, as if saying his name made all of this real. "I've seen you here every day for months. I noticed you before you even knew I existed." "I'm Clara," I replied. Saying my name felt like admitting a secret. He smiled, small and shy. "Clara, I've been scared to tell you. I didn't want to freak you out, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." For hours we talked, not just about the notes, but about our lives, our scars, our pasts, about how sometimes people hurt us, sometimes life feels unbearable, and yet, somehow beauty still exists in tiny moments. The way the rain fell outside, the steam rising from our cups, the quiet laughter that bubbled up when we realized we shared the same obscure favorite book series. And in the middle of all that, I realized something terrifying. I liked him. I liked him a lot. Not just the mysterious, note-writing stranger, but the person sitting across from me, vulnerable and human, with a voice that could crack through the strongest walls. Then just as quickly, a shadow crossed his face. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. "It's why I started writing the notes, why I've been watching you." My heart skipped. "What is it?" I whispered. "My sister, she died 2 years ago," he said, voice tight. She struggled, and I couldn't help her. I promised myself I'd never let someone feel invisible if I could do anything to reach them. That's why I did it. That's why I saw you." The cafe felt like it was spinning. I reached across the table, and he took my hand. The weight of his grief, his purpose, his honesty pressed against my palm. I don't know if I deserve you," he said. I wanted you to know you're seen, even when the world doesn't look." I smiled through tears, heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You've seen me. That's enough." And that night, as the rain fell softly outside, two strangers who once felt invisible found each other in the quiet corners of a busy city. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, hope felt tangible. The next weeks were a strange kind of magic. Portland was wet and gray most days, but when I walked to the cafe to meet Ethan, it felt like the sun had moved inside my chest. We shared coffee in silence, laughter and confessions. He showed me the little corners of the city he loved, the graffiti alley behind the library, the old bookshop with a cat that claimed every visitor, the pier where the waves crashed just loud enough to drown out the world. Each place became ours. But even with the lightness, there was tension. Ethan was careful, protective of his own walls. Some days he'd pull away just slightly, haunted by memories he didn't want to share. I understood that. I'd lived with my own ghost too. But it hurt. It hurt to feel close to someone who might vanish. One evening, walking home from the cafe, the wind sharp and cold, I asked, "Why do you still sit there in the corner? Even when you could, be with people?" He paused, glancing at the streetlights reflecting on wet asphalt. "Because that's where I feel safest," he said. "I'm used to observing. It's how I protect myself. And, well, I like watching the world quietly, and sometimes it's easier than joining it." "You're not alone anymore," I said softly, gripping his hand. "You don't have to be just the observer." He looked at me like I'd just said something revolutionary, and maybe I had. That night, we ended up at his apartment, a small loft above a used record store. He made coffee, we listened to old jazz records, and I watched him in the soft lamplight. Every scar, every shadow on his face seemed like it was telling a story only I was allowed to hear. "I need to tell you something else," he said suddenly, sitting across from me on the floor. "I didn't just write the notes because of my sister. I've been afraid to connect, afraid that someone like me, someone broken, wouldn't be enough for someone like you." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "Ethan, you've been enough from the start. You don't get to hide behind fear with me. Not anymore." He swallowed hard, and then slowly he leaned closer. Our lips met softly, tentative at first, then with a growing certainty. It was messy, imperfect, but it was real. And in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The rain, the city, all of it melted away, leaving just the two of us in a fragile, fleeting forever. Weeks turned into months, and the notes stopped appearing. They weren't needed anymore, because Ethan and I were no longer strangers. We were witnesses to each other's lives, guardians of each other's pain, and companions of each other's joy. Yet, even in our happiness, the past lingered. His sister's absence, my own family struggles, they never fully went away. But we learned to face them together. One winter night, walking home after the café, Ethan stopped me. Snowflakes dusted our shoulders. "Clara, I need to tell you something important. You've changed my life. Every note, every smile, every moment, it's given me a reason to keep moving forward, and I don't ever want to lose you." I smiled, my heart full. "You won't. Not ever. We'll keep each other visible, always." He took my hands, warm and steady. "Promise me something," he whispered. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what the world throws at us, we'll never stop seeing each other. Really seeing, even when it hurts, even when it's hard, even when everything else fades." I nodded, tears slipping onto my cheeks. "I promise." That night, as snow fell lightly on the streets of Portland, we stood there in silence, holding each other, knowing that life would never be perfect, but it could be shared. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Months later, I kept a drawer in my apartment reserved just for the notes he had written me. I never read them again. They didn't need to be read. I knew their power, their magic, their truth. And I knew the truth was alive, breathing, and right beside me every day. Sometimes, I still catch him staring at me across the cafe, that quiet intensity in his eyes. And sometimes, when the world is too heavy, I remember the first note. "You don't have to be strong all the time. Let yourself feel, even if the world thinks you're fragile." And I smile, because I'm not fragile. Not anymore. Not with him. Ethan and I still sit in the corner of that cafe sometimes. Not as strangers, not as secrets, not as anonymous observers of each other's pain, but as witnesses, as partners, as proof that even in the darkest streets, the rainiest days, the loneliest hearts, connection finds a way. And sometimes, when the wind hits just right and the smell of coffee mixes with wet asphalt, I swear I can hear him whispering, just for me, "You're seen. You always have been, and you always will be."